But in general, I'm not too hip on the whole killing people to survive thing either. Even if Douglas was trying to sacrifice me and harvest my creepy powers at the time, I feel like killing people for doing awful things is probably setting a bad precedent for dealing with negative behavior. But I wasn't really thinking of moral implications at the time. When I stabbed Douglas in the throat, I was only thinking that I didn't want to die. On top of that, it never occurred to me that the spell Douglas had been conducting would backfire, and I would steal all his creepy powers instead. Like I said, I'd been busy. Since then, I'd entered into an odd sort of status with the Blackthorn Pack. Because of my services, a fancy way of saying saving a pack member's life and ridding Seattle of a supernatural menace, I was under their protection. Sort of. Brannock, their leader, and Brid's dad, could have left me for dead if he'd felt like it. I'd asked him why he hadn't. His response had been that I seemed okay, and if they let someone waltz in and kill me, there was no telling who would take my place on the council, which governed the local supernatural set. Another thing I was trying to adjust to. Lots of dominoes had toppled after Douglas's death. One of them was his seat on the council, since dead men can't govern. They'd needed a live body to take his place. Guess who'd been nominated? Personally, I thought I was a terrible choice, but no one really asked me. Politics had never been my forte. As a kid, even class clowns seemed like too much responsibility. The funny part was, most of the council seemed scared of me. Necromancers tended to make people twitchy. I was certainly better than Douglas, though. I'd been on the council for a few weeks, and I hadn't killed anyone or masterminded any maniacal plots yet, so they were pretty sure I wasn't in the same weight class of evil as Douglas. Compared to him, I wouldn't even register as a featherweight. I'd never been considered evil before I found out I was a necromancer. The reputation would be kind of cool, if it weren't such a pain in my ass. Anyway, it was all very pragmatic of Brannock to let me live, though his reasons weren't terribly reassuring. Because Brannock wanted to keep me alive, I was getting self-defense lessons from Brid's siblings. She has 4 brothers, though I didn't meet Sayer and Rourke until a few weeks after my abduction and escape. They were currently off running errands, so Sean and Bran were picking on me today, under the watchful eye of Brannock, of course. Usually, the whole clan of brothers joined in the fun. I believe this was to remind me what would happen if I wasn't nice to their baby sister. If I ever displeased her, these boys would be the ones shredding my remains. Because after Brid got done with me, remains were all I would be. My self-defense lessons wouldn't actually help me if I came up against anyone in the pack. Brid and her brothers are hybrids, part werewolf on their mother's side, and part feyhound on their father's. The rest of the pack was either straight werewolf or feyhound, either of which was enough to take one scrawny necromancer. I glanced over at Brannock, who was sitting under a tree, keeping an eye on things. Even though he was relaxed, his back against the bark, a piece of grass between his teeth, I knew if I snuck up and jumped him, I wouldn't land punch number 1. I'm only human, and I can't compete with someone who could easily arm wrestle a bear. Or is a bear. But not every creature I might come up against would have super strength, and I was tired of getting wiped with the floor. I was still getting wiped with the floor now, but at least I was learning. Not fast enough, though. Brannock had assigned Sean as my bodyguard until further notice. Good to know everyone had faith in my ninja skills. After a thorough examination of my injuries, Bran declared me alive and told me to get back into the clearing. Sean was doing the sort of warm-up jog I'd seen boxers do before a match. I didn't think